Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening. Welcome back to Season 3 of the Logical Christian Podcast. I'm your Logical Christian, Dan Irwin. The Logical Christian Podcast is not here to tell you what to think. It's an exercise in how to think. Rather than just accept what we're being told with regard to current events, politics, science, religion, and everything else, we're going to stop the spin, ask questions, dive deep, and look at the world logically. And since logic is a gift from God, most importantly, we're going to look at it all as Christians. Links can be found in the show notes if you'd like to follow along. So with that, let's go be logical Christians. Reaching the peak of Mount Everest. Landing on the moon. Non-stop transatlantic flight. Brain surgery. Replacing organs of the body. These are all examples of things that were once thought to be impossible, but man accepted the challenge, man applied himself, and man overcame. Yet there are some things that still have yet to be conquered, some things that science, technology, and the geniuses of the world have yet to overcome. Setting up a base on Mars, for instance, faster than the speed of light space travel. Stopping before you eat the entire box of Swiss cake rolls. Finding that bolt that you dropped in the engine bay of the car, but it never hit the ground. Things the world may never find a solution for. Only time will tell. On today's episode, first we're going to try to keep up with the Joneses. Then we'll make like evil scientists and capture the sun. And finally, it's not that I'm trying to make some people mad. It just happens when I speak. So sign up for all the credit cards, and I do mean all the credit cards. Then sit in your favorite oversized chair and disconcertingly stroke the head of that very fluffy cat. And finally, put that finger in the air. No, not that one, your index finger. And get ready to say, I'm real happy for you, and I'm gonna let you finish, but... Because for as impossible as it seems, yet again, here we go. Well, I hate to do this, but... All right, students, take your seat. Everyone quiet. Sit down and shut up. It's better. As the poet laureate, Sir M.C. Hammer, so eloquently articulates, quote, Yo, sound the bell. School is in, sucker. You can't touch this. Yes, we're going to have to do a little legwork here, and we need to understand some definitions. The upcoming article has a good number of things I hadn't heard of, or I had but really didn't know nor care what they meant, or that I had heard of, but I fear that possibly some of my audience hasn't, and I'm simply trying to make what's coming as user-friendly as possible for you, my faithful audience. Let's begin, shall we? Content creator, quote, anyone who produces content and shares it with their audience, usually online, although technically applying to any medium. So content is basically, in the broadest sense, something entertaining. Think music of any form, video, podcasts, etc. And today, this is most often seen on various forms of social media, so like YouTube and TikTok and Instagram and many more. This can be everything from instructional to intellectual, frivolous to just plain stupid. Social strategist, quote, a specialized professional who crafts and implements an organization's online presence across various social platforms to engage audiences, build brand awareness, and drive marketing objectives. Okay, so these are generally supposed to be able to analyze markets, understand their target audience, creatively target the desired customer base. If you're managing a web page or a Facebook page for the church, you're technically a social strategist. If you're hired to boost the online presence of a company, you're a social strategist. The goal is to get clicks through to your page or your site and to gain following or attendees or participants, members, or whatever you're looking for. For You page, or FYP as the kids might say, I really have no idea. This is described as the core of TikTok's content discovery experience. That sounds nice. And it's your personalized homepage on TikTok. That's exciting. Through the evil Chinese algorithms, I'm only sort of kidding here, it determines what tailored content you probably need to see. Be what you want to see, need to see. Now, I don't tick, nor do I talk, so I have no idea, but I doubt that it's any different than Instagram deciding what content they think you want or should see or whatever, or what reels pop up on Facebook or whatever your video suggestions are for you on YouTube. It's probably all the same thing, except TikTok would be more evil and more Chinese. Money dysmorphia. Aha. Okay, so you were rolling your eyes with the first couple, the For You page you don't care about, but now money dysmorphia. Got your attention now, didn't I? Per lifehacker.com, or really per the financial therapist, keep that term in mind, that they spoke with, Lindsay Bryan-Podvin, this is a form of cognitive dissonance, a difference between your perception and reality. In the case of money dysmorphia, this is a disconnect between how you perceive your personal financial situation and your actual financial situation. For example, you've got money in the bank, but you obsess over the smallest purchase because you feel that you're broke. Of course, the greater the difference between those two things, the greater your dysmorphia. Financial planner. Quote, a qualified financial advisor practicing in full-service personal finance. They advise clients on investments, insurance, tax, retirement, and estate planning. So basically, they're there to make sure that your money makes you money, right? Or maybe they're there to lie to your face as they rob you blind and eventually they go to prison and you try to figure out how to live on nothing because that's what you have now. That's financial planner. Then you have financial panther. Now this term comes from an episode of The Simpsons where the Simpsons are especially broke because, Homer, and Marge recommends they speak with a financial planner, to which Homer says, "Financial panther, eh?" And then he daydreams about his financial panther attacking the banker who's telling him that he's overdrawn. Then he laughs and he says he's on board. And seriously, I think we could probably all use a financial panther from time to time. Financial therapist. Per nerdwallet.com, quote, a certified financial therapist is an individual who meets specific requirements in the areas of financial therapy, financial planning, and financial counseling, and therapeutic competencies. The certification from the Financial Therapy Association is one that both financial and mental health professionals can pursue. So financial therapy is defined as, quote, financial therapy is therapy that combines behavioral therapy and financial coaching to help improve your thoughts, feelings, and behaviors around money. Now, I've never heard of financial therapy, gotta be honest with you, but I guess if you have a dysmorphia, you need a therapist, don't you? Remember, these days everything is a something, and all of those somethings, they require counselors and probably some sort of meds, right? Okay, now with all that out of the way, let's get into this article, shall we? Found on MoneyWise.com. Headline, young Americans are so obsessed with being rich, it's now distorting their views of their finances. Here's why the norm no longer seems normal. We start with one Ms. Evelyn Hidalgo. Dear Evelyn is a mother. She's a laid-off social strategist for about a year now. She's a TikTok content creator who posts about being a mom living on a budget. She feels, based on her TikTok feed, that the lifestyle she's being told she should have is just impossible for her to attain. She said that she's seeing a mix of people who are struggling to make ends meet and people who are living their best lives now. And you know what? She's probably right. That's kind of how these feeds and these algorithms work. If she's a content creator creating content about living on a budget, she's going to see monetary-related content suggestions. The article then says, quote, she's not the only one who's feeling the dissonance. In fact, a recent study from Credit Karma reveals over 40% of Gen Z and millennials report experiencing money dysmorphia. So we'll look at the Credit Karma study in a moment, but why is everything a something these days? Pastor John MacArthur, head pastor at Grace Community Church in Sun Valley, California, for 55 years now, recently got lambasted by a variety of Christians and non-Christians alike for daring to suggest that there is no such thing as mental illness. No OCD, no ADHD, no PTSD. Quote, those are noble lies to basically give the excuse to, at the end of the day, to medicate people, and Big Pharma is in charge of a lot of that. Now, is he right? He said that he's been reading a book from 2010 entitled The Myth of Mental Illness. The author was a Hungarian psychologist who died at the age of 92 in the year 2012. He argued that the removal of or distortion of religion in the secular culture is resulting in or possibly intentionally manipulating people into believing what he termed a pharmacracy, a rule by pharma and doctors, like a theocracy, a pharmacracy. It sounds like a really interesting book to me, to be honest. I mean, I can't imagine anybody arguing with the idea that we're living in an era of overdiagnosis and overmedication right now. That said, do I agree with what MacArthur said? Not without more information. Do I disagree with what MacArthur said? Oh, definitely not in concept, I don't. I think we've diagnosed a lot of sin as a mental disorder. We've diagnosed a lot of failure to manage our emotions as disorders because we've been sold the lie that we should never have to deal with hard things. Along with that, we've been told now that sin isn't sin, even if it's habitual, a so-called addiction and difficult not to do, as sin generally is. Now it's a disease. Alcoholism isn't a sin. It isn't an addiction. It's a disease. But it's not a disease. That's an incorrect scientific diagnosis. But it's a whole lot easier on our egos if we have a disease. Mitch Hedberg, a comedian who has since passed away, I believe, from doing all the drugs. I mean, all of the drugs. He made a comedy career out of one-liners and short jokes. He said, quote, "Alcoholism is a disease, but it's the only one you can get yelled at for having. Dang it, Otto, you're an alcoholic. Dang it, Otto, you have lupus. One of those two doesn't sound right." And it's funny, but he's right. Either alcoholism is a disease and should be treated as such, or it's not, and we should stop calling it that. Same for obesity, same for a lot of so-called diseases. So what else have we mislabeled? Okay, back to the article and the study. Is the feeling that you have less purchasing power than you really do a dysmorphia, knowing that the term dysmorphia is actually a psychological diagnosis? Is sadness, frustration, even the feeling of depression because you can't live the lifestyle you want or the lifestyle you're being told that you should be living, a psychological disorder? Or is it simply envy and covetousness? Per the Credit Karma study from January 2024, about 45% of Gen Z and millennials are, quote, obsessed with the idea of being rich. Obsessed. About 42% of both are experiencing money dysmorphia, as well as 3 of 10 Americans overall. But only 25% of Gen X and 14% of those over 59 feel this so-called dysmorphia. Also, 48% of Gen Z and 59% of millennials say they feel behind financially. Of those who are being diagnosed with dysmorphia, 82% feel like they're behind in their finances, but 37% of that same group say they have $10,000 in the bank, and 23% of that group say they have $30,000 in the bank. As a comparison, they say the average savings for Americans is about $5,300. Now, let me break in here. The reality is that the value of money is nothing like what it used to be. It's getting worse. Using the CPI inflation calculator, which is the government's calculator, so this uses the published inflation numbers, not the real ones you'd find on like Shadow Stats, but let's just go with it. So you would need $11,800 today to have the same buying power that you had at $10,000 in January of 2021. You'd need $12,250 today as compared to $10,000 in 2019. You'd need $14,250 as compared to 2010, $18,250 as compared to 2000. Our buying power is half of what it was in 1996, which sounds like a long time ago, but is it really? So when you talk about $10,000 in the bank today, it in no way creates the same security it did even a handful of years ago. This can create an additional amount of anxiety when looking at income and savings and outgo and future expenses. Like, look, I've got a kid heading to college in a year. I feel that anxiety, but I live in reality with regard to income, bills, upcoming college expenses. I also understand the frustration of looking at people online, even talking with friends about what they're doing, where they're going, what they're remodeling, what they're buying. And I think, well, why not me? But then I look at my budget and I know why not me. In large part, it's of my own choices, not negative choices, not wasteful choices even, just choices. Again, I live in reality. I may not have the biggest of this, the newest of that, the best of the other thing, but I mean, wow, am I blessed infinitely beyond what I deserve? And to be honest, the logical side of me kicks in and thinks, is that person just wasting money on that thing? And yeah, a lot of times they absolutely are, in my opinion. So, looking at my finances, and I tell the kid that, we can't afford that, but in reality, we can't afford it. Is that dysmorphia? Or is that just me making a financial choice? Is looking at college expenses upcoming and thinking, well, there's no way I can afford that. But realistically knowing that there is a way, there's lots of ways actually that it can be done. I'm being a little bit Chicken Little-ish, right? Is that dysmorphia? Or is that just run-of-the-mill anxiety and stress because I'm looking at this from one single angle and allowing my fears to overwhelm my facts and my faith? Now, according to the study, 27% of Americans say that they're obsessed with the idea of being rich, while 52% of Americans don't think they'll ever be rich. Well, count me in that 52%. I don't think I'll ever be rich. But again, at least in part, that's because of my choices. I'd love to be rich, but there are life choices in my chosen career, for example, that I'm not willing to make in order to come closer to being rich. And I made complete peace with that many, many years ago. Of course, they break down those things with this diagnosis of dysmorphia compared to those who don't have this alleged condition. And surprise of all surprises, everything is worse for those who have been diagnosed with dysmorphia. Additionally, 95% of those with dysmorphia believe their dysmorphia negatively impacts their finances. For instance, 40% say it holds them back from building savings. 38% say it causes them to overspend. 32% say that it's caused them to take on more debt. And 30% say it's causing them to struggle to save for a home or pay down debt. And I'd argue that the diagnosis of dysmorphia has caused 100% of the afflicted to have an easy go-to excuse to essentially play the victim, to make poor financial decisions, and then beg for sympathy. Now, is that cold and unfeeling for me to say that? Maybe. Is it accurate? Absolutely it is. Now, I haven't listened to Dave Ramsey in a long time. To be honest, once he started bringing on a co-host, boy, I lost interest. Now I know, he's going into semi-retirement or whatever. He's setting up the company to continue after he's retired or gone or whatever. But there's really only one Dave Ramsey. Love him or hate him. The others, trying to play that part, they just came off as annoying. Again, totally my opinion on that. And I've talked to others, they think the same thing. That said, when people would call in, there were some that played the victim card. And Ramsey would give them some much-needed suck it up, buttercup, tough love. If you're making $25,000 a year, maybe just because Ford would gladly give you that $85,000 loan for that beautiful new truck doesn't mean you should have taken it. You did this to yourself. You got nobody else to blame. But those who called in and readily admitted that they have a problem, that they did this, that they made the choices that put them in this position, well, he might give them some tough advice, but not tough love. And I'll bet if you were to track the data, more often than not, those playing the victim card are either people who have no religious foundation of any kind, or no Christian faith to speak of, or they claim to, but by their lives, by their fruits, it's plain to see that they are not who they claim to be. The difference with a truly born-again Christian is that we know we're not the victim. I mean, sure, Adam put us in this position, but you know what? If it wasn't for him, I would have taken care of it as soon as I could stand up on my 2 feet and reach the fruit. From an ultimate eternal sense, the only being in all of history who truly was a victim was the God-man, Jesus Christ. He was brutally murdered for absolutely nothing he did. But even with that, Jesus was at worst a willing victim, but expanding our boundaries to eternity, Jesus wasn't a victim at all. He was the victor, the champion. This did not bring shame upon him. This brought glory, all glory and honor and power. Back to the study. This is a longer kind of quote summing up the study. Quote, "Money dysmorphia is kind of like today's version of keeping up with the Joneses," said Courtney Aliv, consumer financial advocate at Credit Karma. "A lot of people are examining their finances and comparing themselves to their peers, people on social media, and even celebrities, which is bringing up feelings of inadequacy. This distortion between perception and reality can prevent people from taking steps towards achieving their financial goals. A few ways to overcome money dysmorphia are to take an honest look at your finances, set clear goals, make a plan, and most importantly, keep your eyes on your own paper. If your goal is to build up your savings, start by doing an audit of your finances to see where in your budget you can make room for savings. From there, you can schedule automatic payments from each paycheck to help hold you accountable and incrementally increase your savings. And look, I appreciate that, right? A few practical pieces of advice. That doesn't address the problem, though. I'd argue that giving the advice to keep your eyes on your own paper isn't actually realistic either. In fact, I'd go farther and say that these people could get rid of social media, the internet, TV, movies, magazines, books, newspapers, and only limit their interaction with the outside world to errands that they absolutely must run, and the problem would still remain. To go into a store for nearly all of us is to see mountains of things we want that we can't afford. To go in public is to see cars nicer than yours, clothes nicer than yours, the right shoes, the perfect hair, the motorcycle, convertible, monster truck, or other toy that you don't have, the perfect fingernails, the designer purse, and the list goes on forever. We can't get away from someone with more or better, or more and better, and those are the worst kinds of people. See, the problem isn't an unrealistic view of your finances. The problem isn't that you're a victim. The problem isn't dysmorphia. The problem is sin. This is commandment number 10, or 9 and 10 if you're a Catholic, and you need to get to the 10 commandments, but you have to get rid of that pesky no idol worship one because, Catholic. This is thou shalt not covet. This is deeply desiring something you don't have that maybe someone else has, and you want it. In fact, if you could get away with it, you just take it. But up until recently, theft was considered a crime, so what did most of us do when we coveted things? We took out a loan, or we opened another credit card. We borrowed from a friend or family member or whatever. We all know that the love of money is the root of all kinds of evil, not the oft misquoted money is the root of all evil, although that's probably not too far from the truth in all reality, in a sin-cursed world, for being honest. But no, the love of money is the root of all kinds of evil. The coveting of stuff is the logical extension of the love of money. But notice that money isn't mentioned in the 10 Commandments. We find out in Matthew from Jesus himself that we can't serve two masters, both God and money. We find out in 1 Timothy from the Apostle Paul that the love of money is the root of all kinds of evil. We see the effects of money and herds and flocks and land and plunder, and all throughout the Old and New Testament we see how this affects people. But why wouldn't money be in the 10 Commandments if it's so dangerous? Now me, a theologian, but not a theologian, would argue that it's because money is nothing but a tool. Much like the always raging gun debate, the gun is not the killer, it's an inanimate object, a tool. The killer is the person. The same can be said for money. Money or possessions are just objects, just tools, a means of bartering. The problem is the covetous heart of the person. The 10 Commandments aren't given as specific laws, but more of categorical laws. This is why Jesus clarified that when you lust, you commit adultery. When you hate, you murder. We hear from James that, quote, each one is tempted when he is carried away and enticed by his own lust. Then when lust has conceived, it gives birth to sin. And when sin is fully matured, it brings forth death. There's a progression. It's not wanting what someone else has, it's desiring it in an unhealthy way. It's wanting it because you know that God hasn't blessed you unless you get that. In fact, why don't you already have that thing? If God loved you, if he had any idea what he's doing up there, you would have that thing now, maybe even 2 of those things. And why does that person have it when you don't? You're better than that person. You deserve it more. What? I hope that person loses it or breaks it or someone steals it from them, because if I don't have it, nobody should have it, especially that person. If you've never walked down a path, maybe not exactly the same as that, but similar to that, hit your knees right now and thank God. Not if you're driving. Do it later. For most of us, we felt that sinful covetousness, at least from time to time. And as James shows his progression, you can walk backwards from commandment 10 to 5 by looking at the story of David and Bathsheba, which shows you the dangers of what seems to be kind of a ticky-tack commandment, just coveting, right? Just wanting stuff. So what if I want what that person has? Nobody's harmed by that, right? So David, walking outside on the roof of his palace, spies a young woman on a roof in the bath, buck naked. David, being the king, being a man holding significant power, wanted that naked woman for his very own. And it's doubtful he wanted to talk about, the upcoming football season or just to sit down and play checkers or something. He knew she was the wife of someone else. He knew that he had no right to her, nor did he have need of her, speaking very crassly, as he had various wives and concubines to choose from. He just wanted her. Commandment 10, thou shalt not covet. So he sent some people just to find out who she was. Just find out who she is exactly. No big deal. Just kind of curious. Commandment 9, lying to himself as to his intent, lying to the messenger as to his true desire, as if the messenger didn't know. Then finding out she was the wife of Uriah, someone in David's army, someone David knew was away at battle, he sent messengers to go get her, bring her over here. Commandment 8, thou shalt not steal. Fade to black, bada bing, bada boom. Commandment 7, thou shalt not commit adultery. And Bathsheba then becomes pregnant, probably because, as one of my best friends, who shall remain nameless, used to think when he was little that they held hands while walking down the beach, causing instant pregnancy. So David had to cover up his Commandment 10, 9, 8, and 7 breaking with a bit more Commandment 9, finally culminating in Commandment 6 of Bathsheba's husband, thou shalt not kill. And if you want to throw in Commandment number 5, honor thy father and thy mother, well, gotta believe that neither Jesse nor Mrs. Jesse or Nitzephet, per Jewish tradition, would have felt a whole lot of honor with their son rapid-fire breaking Commandments 6 through 10. There's a lack of contentment in this world, driven by our sin of covetousness. And look, I'm not saying it's the worst of the worst people, the hell-bound pagans that are doing all the coveting. I'll be the first to admit that I probably covet on an all too regular basis. And it's really easy to do that with today's social media. As a divorced man, if you've ever looked on Facebook, the reality is that every couple is happily married. As a dad, the reality is that every family is perfect. The kids are perfect. The parents are perfect. Perfectly perfect. As a consumer, why do they have those toys? How is he able to go on all those trips? Etc., etc. A movie that I'd recommend, but cautiously so, knowing that it's in no way a Christian movie, but has a great ending, much like all the 80s and 90s John Hughes movies used to, is entitled Just Married, with Ashton Kutcher and Brittany Murphy. The basic premise is a newlywed couple on their European honeymoon where everything goes wrong. Now, without spoiling any of it, Ashton, or Tom in the movie, asks his dad how he and his mom were always so happy. They were sitting down looking through a photo album, and his dad explains that, quote, you never see the hard days in a photo album, but those are the ones that get you from one happy snapshot to the next. That is one of the most insightful statements ever, in my opinion. Looking at the socials, all you see are the perfect shots with the perfect lighting, typically with a filter, of the perfect person, family, or experience. But those are pictures. They're not the whole of life. Between those pictures, what we don't see are illnesses, sadness, arguments, broken appliances, flooded floors, chronic pain, blown up engines, bad hair days, haven't taken a shower in 3 days, yelling at the kids, rubbing your temples, figuring out how to make ends meet this month, various struggles with various addictions, slamming doors, putting a hole in the drywall because someone threw a frozen TV dinner at the wall because he or she was angry. Days. Life is hard. Movies most often portray that as comedy. Social media doesn't show it. Most people are reluctant to admit that they're struggling. And there's only one answer. Notice I didn't say one solution. Unfortunately, in a sin-cursed world, as sinful humans, we're going to sin, and we're going to have to deal with sin. We're going to choose and reap the consequences of our choices. But there's only one answer to the prison cell of covetousness, and that's Jesus. Salvation through Jesus. As I said, I covet probably more than I realize, but even if I allow my mind to linger to the point of pseudo-depression because why don't I have that? The reality is that I have more than I deserve because I have eternal life with Christ. This world is temporary. Salvation is the great equalizer if you think about it. No matter if you have more than you need or you're struggling check to check, or worse, if you're saved, you have infinitely more than you ever need. If you're saved, you're literally living in hell right now, as in this life is the worst you'll ever experience. And when you look at it, rich or poor, persecuted or not, despised or not, we are all immensely blessed on this earth. And when God's appointed moment comes for our lives to end, we'll understand true blessing, how fleeting this current life was and how futile our pursuit of stuff was. Now, if you're not saved, this is your heaven, as in this is the best you'll ever have. Think of the best days that you've had thus far. Well, that's heaven for you. Think about your absolute worst, most nightmarish days thus far. That's also heaven for you. If you're not saved, when God's appointed moment for your life comes, you'll understand how blessed you were from your Creator God, because you'll now be forever in torment, suffering the wrath of God. My suggestion, don't wait to make that choice. Repent and believe. Do it now. So although I sin, although I covet, although I can feel myself falling down that hole of, I deserve that, I can also snap back out of it and see how blessed I am. God has given me so much to be thankful for, so much I don't deserve in the least. And I'm not even talking about salvation. I'm just talking about as an average human on the planet. There's a contentment that comes with salvation, however, not necessarily happiness or an easy life, but a joy that transcends happiness, a contentment that transcends desire. The final section of the Credit Karma study is labeled Comparison, the Thief of Joy. And although I know what they're saying, it should actually read Comparison, the Thief of Happiness. A true joy can only be found through salvation in Christ, and it cannot be taken away. So do people have money dysmorphia? No. I'd argue that people have sin, that people have unsaved souls, unrepentant lives, and the desire for their feelings and their actions to not be their fault. These people don't need a financial therapist. They need a good church, a Bible, a reading plan, and maybe a biblical counselor. Overall, they need Jesus. We all need Jesus. The DC-15 was more commonly known as the Dyson Ball, released in 2005. You know the Dyson Ball, the upright canister vacuum that rather than having the conventional wheels on the back, it had a big goofy-looking ball that it rolled on. Be honest, kind of hard to believe that came out nearly 20 years ago now. Could have sworn I was older than 5 when it came out. Don't do the math. Just don't. Just move on. Dyson claimed that the Dyson Ball was more maneuverable, just simply using a twist of the handle to the right or, and you'll never believe this, to the left. This was actually a playoff of James Dyson's very first invention, the ball barrow, back in the 1970s, which was a wheelbarrow with more of a sphere as the rolling element rather than a tire. He claimed it allowed for more stability, more maneuverability, and it was easier to use on soft ground. The ball barrow was patented to the company he worked for at the time, so he wasn't able to cash in on his balls. 30 years later, despite being cautioned not to do so, he put his ball under a vacuum. I'm literally 13 years old. I'll stop that now. The Dyson Ball vacuum didn't sell very well, unfortunately. At least the initial DC-15 model didn't. It was kind of pricey, pretty heavy. People didn't trust this new scary-looking vacuum configuration. So why do we care about the Dyson Ball? Oh, we don't. Like we don't care about this at all. I'm sure it's a fine vacuum. I have no idea. But this segment has nothing to do with the Dyson Ball. This segment has to do with Dyson spheres. I just wanted to head off the misunderstanding, just to head it off at the pass there, just kind of get it right out there in front of everybody. We're not talking about the vacuum. And the creator of the ball is not the creator, theorizer of the sphere. So forget everything that you've been told about the Dyson Ball. It has literally no bearing, no ball bearing on this segment. Found on MSN.com, headline, Hunting for Dyson Spheres Across 1,000 Galaxies to Find Alien Life. So I saved this article thinking, maybe this could be used for the podcast, but with great trepidation because it's a pretty quirky, narrowly focused, and fairly nerdy topic that I don't know anything about, and I have doubts that most of you know anything about. I mean, I kind of have doubts that you or I even really care about this. I mean, if our name isn't Dyson, why would we, right? And then I got about halfway through the article, and my thought was, wow, this is one of the dumbest things I think I've ever heard of, and that's what clinched it for me. I just kind of knew that you needed to hear about this as well. For more than 60 years, we have been furiously scanning the skies, watching, listening, looking for any signs of extraterrestrial life. Quote, despite finding over 2,000 exoplanets, we haven't detected any communication signals from alien civilizations. This raises the classic question, if intelligent life exists, why haven't we found it? Ooh, pick me. But no, they didn't pick me. So these exoplanets, they're simply planets that exist outside our solar system, orbiting other stars. So this article says there's 2,000 of them, but according to NASA, there are more than 5,000 that have been confirmed to date, and thousands more that are apparently candidates. Now, I don't know if they need to be voted in or fill out the paperwork, or maybe they're just behind on their membership dues, I'm not sure. But NASA seems to think there are multiples more than what MSN thinks. Doesn't really matter. It actually compounds the problem. Why aren't we aware of any other life forms out there? So a study was done in 2020 by an astronomer from Columbia University to calculate the statistical odds of life existing somewhere other than Earth. According to news.columbia.edu, quote, "We know from the geological record that life started relatively quickly as soon as our planet's environment was stable enough to support it. We also know that the first multicellular organism, which evolved to produce today's technological civilization, took far longer to emerge, approximately 4 billion years. But despite knowing when life first appeared on Earth, scientists still do not understand how life occurred, which has important implications for the likelihood of finding life elsewhere in the universe." Now, the author is correct on one thing. Life started as soon as the environment was stable enough to support it. Of course, all of that happened in a few days about 6,000 years ago by God. But that's not an acceptable answer, as that's religion. And what this author just said was considered to be science. The problem is that they don't actually know any of these things they claim to know. They looked at data and evidence. They limited their possible explanations to only evolution. And then they made up a story. Anyway, David Kipping, an assistant professor in the Department of Astronomy, said, quote, "The rapid emergence of life and the late evolution of humanity in the context of timeline of evolution are certainly suggestive, but in this study, it's possible to actually quantify what the facts tell us." So right there, you know that his analysis is going to be off, as what he's calling facts are quite literally fantasy. Anyway, using the made-up so-called facts, Kipping modeled 4 different scenarios for life out there somewhere. Number 1, life is common and often develops intelligence. Number 2, life is rare but often develops intelligence. Number 3, life is common and rarely develops intelligence. And number 4, life is rare and rarely develops intelligence. Now, after modeling these 4 scenarios using his statistical math and probably some black magic and voodoo, he found that the life is common scenarios, regardless of intelligence, are 9 times more likely to happen than the life is rare scenarios. Now, using that information, he then has to throw in the 2 possibilities with regard to planets. Either planets very similar in conditions and evolutionary timelines as Earth are common, or they're not. If they are, he concludes that, quote, "The analysis suggests that life should have little problem spontaneously emerging on other planets." So, if life readily pops up, what are the odds that they'll be intelligent? Well, the study starts to break down a little here, but he found the odds of 3 to 2 that intelligence would be rare. This means, quote, "If we played Earth's history again, the emergence of intelligence is actually somewhat unlikely," said Kipping. And then he summarized all his hypotheses, his statistics, his calculations, his magic, and he stated that the odds of finding intelligent life out there somewhere, it's 50-50. Now, he does state that the odds are fairly high that the universe is teeming with life. But the odds of intelligent life out there somewhere, well, I mean, shoot, anything's possible, right? So leaving our little excursion to Columbia University, back to our article, they concur that it's possible we're not seeing signs of life because, quote, "One possible answer is that advanced civilizations might be exceedingly rare, even if planets are common." Okay? Yes, rare. Very rare. They infer from that possibility that we may actually be the only intelligent life in the entire galaxy. Yeah, so we need to look outside our galaxy, obviously. So that's what's being done. We believe that although there are thousands of planets in our galaxy, that although they've had the same billions of years, that although evolution is an amazing thing, I guess we're just the only ones that evolved in our entire galaxy. I mean, this part of the theory doesn't even make logical sense. It makes arrogant sense, but not logical sense. Well, in comes Project Hephaestus. Now, Hephaestus was the Greek god of artisans, blacksmiths, carpenters, craftsmen, fire, metallurgy, metalworking, sculpture, and volcanoes. And you know that he was not happy about that. I mean, are you kidding me? I mean, Zeus only has the sky and thunder to worry about, and you want me to be the god of every freaking thing else? I'm assuming he also became the god of socialism and labor unions after a short time as well. Project Hephaestus is looking for signs of, quote, extraterrestrial technology rather than direct signals. So we, on planet Earth here, we have what we consider to be fairly advanced technology here on the planet. Our space technology, although cool, and I'll admit, I try to watch every single SpaceX launch because it's just fascinating to me, especially when that little Falcon 9 first stage launch vehicle comes back to land upright on its four legs in the space of a pretty small painted circle. Oh, it's fantastic. But as cool as that is, our extraplanetary technology is, truthfully, it's fairly rudimentary. You got satellites and telescopes and probes and a space station that really just kind of hangs around within a few days' space drive of Earth. And for us, although we're at such an infantile stage, we started shooting signals out into space to see if we could get any response a long time ago. We've got no response. We detected no signals. So now we're going to go look for higher forms of technology from other life forms. I mean, do we think that they didn't think of shooting out signals? Or are they so advanced that they gave up on signals a long time ago? But if they're that far advanced, past us, why haven't we been contacted in some form? Or have we? And no, we haven't. So Project Hephaestus, and you don't care about this part at all, but you'll understand why I'm telling you this presently, is funded by the Magnus Bergvall Foundation and Nordenskjoldjaska Swedenborgsfonden, the first Swedish attempt at searching for life out there somewheres. You see why you want to hear that? And I'm not going to say that again. If you want to hear it again, just skip back a little bit. You can hear my attempt at that. And I'm sure I said it absolutely correctly. So if we're not looking for signals, if we're looking beyond our galaxy for technology, what are we looking for exactly? Why, quote, large-scale engineering projects, interstellar propulsion mechanisms, and industrial pollution in the atmospheres of exoplanets. Of course it's pollution. And again, I have to ask, what? I mean, how illogical and arrogant are we to think that there are complete alien civilizations out there somewhere with interstellar propulsion mechanisms, but we're the only ones that thought to send out beeps and boops? I mean, just amazing to me. So Project Hephaestus has already done some work, studying more than 1,000 galaxies that they consider to be similar to the Milky Way. Now, how they determine that, I have no idea. And they're looking for Kardashev, that's not Kardashian, Kardashev Type 3 civilizations that have constructed Dyson spheres. Okay. Backing up a little bit again, the Kardashev scale, this was designed in 1964 by Russian astrophysicist Nikolai Kardashev, and what are the odds that the scale and his last name were the same thing? I mean, wow, coincidence. He was searching for alien life about 60 years ago. He had a scale of 1 to 3. Later, other astronomers added 4 and 5. The level of a civilization is determined by the energy the civilization harnesses to use. Now we, the earthbound human race, are a type 0. We aren't even on the scale yet. We're just silly monkeys right now still. A type 1 civilization is one that has been able to harness all the energy available on their own planet. This means controlling it, gathering it, storing it, and using it on demand. And this isn't just natural resources. This includes things like volcanoes, earthquakes, the weather itself. All natural sources of energy are harnessed and controlled for our use. That's type 1. A type 2 civilization is one that has harnessed the power of their own star, their own sun. This isn't just collecting solar energy. This is literally controlling the star itself. This is where the theory of a Dyson sphere comes in. To round this out, a type 3 civilization is one that has captured, harnessed, and controls all the power in their galaxy. Every star, every planet, every black hole, everything controlled by the civilization. A type 4 civilization is one that essentially controls all the energy in the entire universe. And a type 5 civilization is one where the people are now gods. Not only can they harness and control everything, they can now manipulate the universe as they please. There are literally legitimate scientists who believe that if we just start with taking care of our own planet, eliminating war, and work as a global unit, supporting science, we could attain this level at some point in the future. Now, is it just me, or does this kind of reek of the Tower of Babel just on a much grander scale? Anyway, we, humans, are still stuck on Go. We haven't even made it to Type 1 yet, but we've sent probes and signals into the ether to contact alien life to tell them we're here. But the Swedish study, that I won't name again, wants to locate signs of Type 3 civilizations, those who have harnessed and control all the energy sources in their entire galaxy. I mean, this sounds like a poorly written B-level acted shoestring budget sci-fi movie. But this is what's passing as legitimate scientific research. Okay. So what they're really looking for are Dyson spheres. So what's a Dyson sphere, you may ask? No, it's not an easily maneuverable, overly expensive upright vacuum. We've already been over this. Ugh. No, the idea of a Dyson sphere was theorized by a physicist named Freeman Dyson in 1960, when incidentally a lot of really bad cheap sci-fi movies were being made. A Dyson sphere is a theoretical massive engineering project where a star, a sun, is completely encircled by floating plates or platforms that completely encompass the sun, allowing the civilization to not only harness all energy from that sun, but control what energy can escape into the galaxy, and also allows the civilization to live on the platforms, thus creating an entire planet of sorts, with the sun as its de facto core, giving them massive, unlimited power. Can you see why I just had to share this with you? I mean, is this not just certifiably insane? It's insane, right? I'm not the crazy one here. They are, right? Right? This goes further, though. Obviously, you couldn't build right on top of the star. It's hot. So the Dyson sphere is actually something that would be built at a large distance from the sun, with the inhabitants living on the inside part of the platforms, on the sun side. And as the civilization grew, the sphere could be dismantled and made larger or moved to a larger sun and then reassembled. But of course, as Dyson warned, the radiation energy would build up inside this sun shell, and eventually the candy coating would melt and we'd all die. But wouldn't we all die living on the inside of the sun-facing shell, much closer to the sun than we currently are? Anyway? Doesn't matter. Can you believe that there are humans that take this as a literal, theoretical, possible thing? This Dyson sphere theory and the civilization types have got to be the dumbest scientific theory I've ever heard of. I mean, save for evolution, maybe. And I mean, it's a close second to evolution. One of my personal favorite sayings is that everything is a matter of probability versus possibility. Everything is possible, but the probability is what's important. I say that, or a derivative of that, a lot. Probably too much. Now, I may have to modify the saying at this point. Not everything is possible. All right? I mean, evolution isn't possible. It's a stupid theory. Dyson spheres aren't possible. It's another stupid theory. Type 1 to 5 civilizations? That's not possible. More stupid theories. But we're told to trust the science. If this is considered science, then not only do I not trust your science, I have no interest in your science, or anything you have to say for that matter, and I have serious questions about your sanity. So alleged scientists with this Hephaestus project thing are searching for, quote, unusual energy patterns or other indicators of such massive constructs. And what have these, scare quote, scientists found in their analysis of over 1,000 galaxies? Quote, the search revealed no strong candidates for Kardashev Type 3 civilizations. In layman's terms, they found nothing. Now, you should be able to hear my shocked face there, but they did somehow, I think arbitrarily, at least that's what it appears, they did set a limit to how many galaxies similar to the Milky Way galaxy may have advanced civilizations currently utilizing Dyson spheres, and that number is less than 1 out of every 300 galaxies. Like the Milky Way currently may have advanced civilizations currently using Dyson spheres, even though they found no evidence of anything, analyzing over 1,000 galaxies where they should have found 3 or 4 using Dyson spheres per their own made-up percentage limit. Quote, while no definitive evidence was found, this result still opens new research avenues within mainstream astronomy. The study's methodology and findings provide a framework for future investigations and help refine the search criteria for detecting signs of advanced extraterrestrial civilizations. Additionally, the project has uncovered several highly unusual galaxies that merit further study, potentially leading to new discoveries in astrophysics and the nature of galaxies. So they found nothing. This does nothing. But, hey, it wasn't a total failure because it can't be. They need the grant money to keep rolling in so they can continue the research and also to continue feeding themselves. So please give us more money to keep studying this nonsense. And sadly, this article doesn't end with, they found nothing, which is really where the article should end, with maybe a bit of mockery just to kind of wrap up the story. But no. This Project Hephaestus has put out a second paper focusing on detection of near-complete Dyson spheres by looking for very dim stars. That may mean that these Dyson spheres are, they're almost complete, encompassing most of the star that they chose to encompass. For this study, they're using the Gaia space mission. I believe I covered that one just recently, and the RAVE survey. And no, it really doesn't matter what either of these things are. I wouldn't worry about it. It's pointless. But what do you know? They identified a, quote, handful of stars exhibiting the expected distance discrepancies indicative of near-complete Dyson spheres. These stars showed significant differences between their Gaia parallax distances and RAVE spectrophotometric distances, suggesting the presence of large structures dimming their light. So, maybe this is happening out there, right? Maybe they found some. Except for the next paragraph, quote, however, further observations suggested natural explanations for these discrepancies. One common issue is the presence of unseen companions, such as binary stars or planets, which can interfere with Gaia's measurements and create the illusion of a distance discrepancy. Oh, well, we were so close. So close. Don't worry, though. They've also vomited out a third paper. Now, this was a study of the brightness of a star as compared to the heat detected from the star in, of course, I'm preaching to the choir here, the mid-infrared spectrum. No, don't worry about that either. What they found is that a lot of young stars, they're calling them young, there's actually no evidence that any new stars have ever formed since the beginning of creation. But these young stars actually give less light and higher levels of heat at the mid-infrared spectrum. But once they filtered out those young stars, they still didn't find anything. But hold on, they did set another limit, saying that fewer than 1 in 50,000 stars within 100 parsecs, which is, approximately 325 light years of Earth, could potentially have a Dyson sphere at 90% completion, operating at a temperature of 300 Kelvin. Quote, this limit provides a benchmark for the prevalence of advanced civilizations in our galaxy and helps refine future searches for extraterrestrial technologies. Okay, so what have we learned today? Well, first, we are a very underwhelming civilization, a Type 0, and yet we're sending out beacons through the galaxy looking for signs of life. Next, the probability of other civilizations evolving out there to at least our level of intelligence is statistically and mathematically about 50-50. Next, other civilizations are so advanced that they no longer have time to send out bleeps and bloops. They're too busy with their interstellar propulsion devices and building shells around stars, and yet we've never seen nor heard of any other civilization out there. After analyzing over 1,000 galaxies, we've determined that there should be 3 or 4 of these candy-coated sun shells, but we didn't find any. We also found, well, not a single sun with a mostly complete shell, but at the same time, we've also found that there are no partially completed shells either. Now, all that said, we know that there must be life out there because evolution, right? And yet, it seems that no other civilization that we know of has been interested enough to look for signs of life on other planets, like ours. Otherwise, with their advancement enough to harness a star, wouldn't they have found us with the intent, at the very least, to enslave us or to eat us or something? This is science. Welcome to it. This displays the arrogance of man. We simply know that evolution happened and when it happened. And although this article claims we don't know how it happened, come on, if you ask the right scientists, they know exactly how it happened. We also know that it must have happened on other planets and other galaxies. We know the direction of technological advancement for all civilizations, so we know that we know how to find these other civilizations, and yet we apparently ignore the fact that they'd likely come to the same conclusion, that other life must be out there somewhere, and start doing their own searching and sending signals and finding us, since we know they're so much more advanced than us. Now we have all of this knowledge, and yet we still haven't found anything that gives even the hint that life has evolved elsewhere. Amazing, isn't it? The science fantasy tale that we just walked through has got to be one of the most ridiculous attempts at explaining away the possibility of there being a God that I've ever heard. There's quite literally nothing rational, nothing sensical, nothing logical about any of this. This isn't science. Just because they use, science-y like words and concepts and they do studies and collect data, it doesn't make it science. But the fact that they completely discount a narrative that simply and completely explains how all of this came into being, how we, humanity, and life in general are unique in the entire universe, and why, their dismissal of this without thorough investigation already moves it out of the realm of science anyway and places it into the realm of religion. In fact, going further, we all know the 6 questions that are fundamental to investigating anything, right? The 5 W's and that one pesky H that gets tacked on there. What, where, when, why, who, and how. They claim to know the what and the when. We all know the where and the who, although we, Christians, have an ultimate who to this as well as an immediate mortal who. This article claims that they don't know the how, although science does claim to know how. But they don't ask the why, because the answer to why for the evolutionist is, no reason. There's no purpose, no meaning, there's nothing. We're here because we're an accident. We evolved through accidents. We scurry around this little planet for a handful of decades, then we die and we decompose, completely forgotten about within a few generations. For most of us, our legacy dying out as fast, if not faster, than our memory. There is no why. How unsatisfying is that? And that in itself doesn't even make logical sense. We know that there must be a why. That's one of the first questions kids learn. Why? There's a full root cause analysis method called the 5 whys. Searching out why is inherent to our very being. As a Christian, a young earth, Bible-believing Christian, we can answer all these questions with arguably the most important. Why are we here? Well, we're here to glorify God and enjoy Him forever. We're here to praise and worship our Creator. We're here to bring glory to His name. How about another why question? Why did God create all this? Well, for His pleasure, to display His greatness, to glorify Himself. As for this article, this convoluted, disjointed, fantastical, pseudoscientific theory based on just as implausible, just as fanciful theories and hypotheses, the why question we should be asking is, why should we believe this garbage? We have a first-hand account given to us in a historical document that literally makes sense of all of this, as well as clearly defining and outlining our role and purpose in all of this. So why waste our time with nonsense? So, we meet again for the first time, for the last time. Actually, for the fourth time. Our fourth time addressing the question, do you know what you believe and why? As we just discussed in the previous segment, the question of why is crucially important. It's a question that Christians should boldly ask regarding their faith. We should never just believe what we're told to believe. That's a really shaky faith to stand on. Sadly, a lot of Christians go through life and never ask why they believe what they claim to believe. They just kind of choose to take the easier path. It's good to know what you believe, don't get me wrong. But if you can't answer the question of why, you're potentially resting on a blind faith. And you won't find anywhere in the Bible that tells you to just have a blind faith. We're told to read, to study, to meditate on the law and the word. We're told to go to church with our brothers and sisters in Christ. Is your church helping you understand why you believe what you believe? And that said, you shouldn't only just rely on your pastor to tell you why, because that turns into kind of a blind faith in your pastor. But you should be able to rely on your pastor helping you, reasoning together. Which brings up a good question. How often do you hear both a what and a why from the pulpit? For that matter, this is an even better question, how often do you hear the clear presentation of the gospel on a Sunday morning? And I'm not talking about, tacking on an altar call at the end of the motivational speech or whatever you just heard. I'm talking about a clear biblical message addressing what and why and a coherent connection between the message and the gospel. If you're not hearing the gospel on a regular basis, if you're not hearing a solid biblical message, if you're not hearing the what and the why on a Sunday morning, let me just suggest that you may want to look very closely at what you're being fed. There are a lot of churches out there and a lot of pastors that shouldn't be. Anyway, to the point of the segment, this is our fourth look at what we believe and why per the Heidelberg Catechism. If you haven't been following along, let me recommend you go back and listen to the past segments. It should be every fourth segment working backwards, so episode 163, 159, and 155, I'm pretty sure. Now, assuming you've been keeping up, that you know what we're doing here, in the last lesson we got all the way through question 4, which if I'm doing my sums correctly, means we're on question 5. Now, referring to question 4, where we're told that God's law requires us to love the Lord your God with all your heart, with all your soul, with all your mind, and we're supposed to love our neighbor as ourselves, question 5, can you live up to all this perfectly? The answer, no. I have a natural tendency to hate God and my neighbor. So, number of references for this, which is good, as believe it or not, this answer can be pretty controversial, especially today. So the Heidelberg breaks the answer down into 2 parts. The first part is the answer, no. And they find this from a number of biblical references. First, Romans 3, 9 through 20 and 23. What then? Are we any better off? No, not at all, for we have already charged that all, both Jews and Greeks, are under the power of sin. As it is written, there is no one who is righteous, not even one. There is no one who has understanding. There is no one who seeks God. All have turned aside. Together they have become worthless. There is no one who shows kindness. There is not even one. Their throats are open graves. They use their tongues to deceive. The venom of vipers is under their lips. Their mouths are full of cursing and bitterness. Their feet are swift to shed blood. Ruin and misery are in their paths, and the way of peace they have not known. There is no fear of God before their eyes. Now we know that whatever the law says, it speaks to those who are under the law, so that every mouth may be silenced and the whole world may be held accountable to God. For no human will be justified before him by deeds prescribed by the law. For through the law comes the knowledge of sin, since all have sinned and fall short of the glory of God. They also throw in a reference 1 John 1, 8 and 10. If we say that we have no sin, we deceive ourselves and the truth is not in us. If we say that we have not sinned, we make him a liar and his word is not in us. Okay. The second part of the question regarding our natural tendency to hate God and neighbor, they have a number of references here. Genesis 6:5 says, "Then Yahweh saw that the evil of man was great on the earth, and that every intent of the thoughts of his heart was only evil continually." Jeremiah 17:9 says, "The heart is more deceitful than all else and is desperately sick. Who can know it?" Romans 7:23-24 says, "But I see a different law in my members, waging war against the law of my mind and making me a captive to the law of sin which is in my members. Wretched man that I am! Who will deliver me from the body of this death?" Romans 8:7 says, "Because the mind set on the flesh is hostile toward God, for it does not subject itself to the law of God, for it is not even able to do so." Ephesians 2:1-3 says, "And you were dead in your transgressions and sins, in which you formerly walked according to the course of this world, according to the ruler of the power of the air, the spirit that is now working in the sons of disobedience, among whom we all also formerly conducted ourselves in the lusts of our flesh, doing the desires of the flesh and of the mind, and were by nature children of wrath, even as the rest." And then finally, Titus 3:3 says, "For we ourselves also once were foolish, disobedient, deceived, enslaved to various lusts and pleasures, spending our life in malice and envy, despicable, hating one another." This answer, our inability to love God and neighbor, to in fact have a natural tendency to hate God, is really a core difference between Reformed and non-Reformed, or you could say Calvinist and Arminian theology. These verses, the fact that we are dead in our sins, that there is none righteous, that we are not able to follow the law, speak to the Reformed position. That absent God's election, we would never choose God, as we are literally not able to do so. Dead men can't do anything. And even if we were able to do so, we wouldn't do it. We're not able to do it. The Arminian position says that God offers salvation, and there's a small spark of goodness in all mankind, which allows his free will to take God up on his offer or not. Now, for most of my life, I agreed with the Arminian position. I knew what I believed, but I didn't know why. And when I actually started to study my Bible, and I know that sounds either silly or maybe demeaning, let me assure you, I'm being completely serious here. When I started looking at the text, I can't logically make the non-Reformed position work anymore. Without belaboring the point, let me encourage you to dig into the scriptures for yourself. Don't take my word for it. Don't necessarily take your pastor's word for it. Dig in, search out the answers to questions. Don't be afraid of difficult passages, and don't be afraid of finding what you find. The bottom line, regardless of theological worldview, is that we are sinners. We can't love God or neighbor perfectly by our very nature. Moving on, question 6. Did God create people so wicked and perverse? Answer, no. God created them good and in his own image, that is, in true righteousness and holiness, so that they might truly know God their Creator, love him with all their heart, and live with God in eternal happiness to praise and glorify him. Now, the Heidelberg breaks this answer down into 5 parts. So first, God created them good. This is taken from Genesis 1:31. "And God saw all that he had made, and behold, it was very good. And there was evening, and there was morning, the 6th day." If there was wickedness or perversity in man, there is no way that God could have called all his creation, including man and woman, very good. Next, God created people in his own image. Genesis 1:26-27 says, "Then God said, let us make man in our image, according to our likeness, so that they will have dominion over the fish of the sea, and over the birds of the sky, and over the cattle, and over all the earth, and over every creeping thing that creeps on the earth. And God created man in his own image. In the image of God, he created him. Male and female, he created them." The next section, God created people in true righteousness and holiness. Ephesians 4:24 says, "And to put on the new man, which in the likeness of God has been created in righteousness and holiness of the truth." Now, if you broaden out this passage just a little bit, we find that Paul is speaking about the Gentiles, or in this case, that means the pagans, the unbelievers, and how we, Christians, are no longer walking in the same manner as they continue. We, through salvation, put off the old man, renew our minds, and put on the new man, created in the likeness of God. Next section, God created people so that they might truly know God, their Creator. Colossians 3:10, and have put on the new man who is being renewed to a full knowledge and according to the image of the one who created him. This is almost identical to what Paul just wrote in Ephesians, which we just spoke about, renewing our mind to understand who God is again, like was originally intended. Finally, God created man to love him with all their heart, live with God in eternal happiness, and to praise and glorify him. They take this from Psalm 8. O Yahweh, our Lord, how majestic is your name in all the earth, who displays your splendor above the heavens. From the mouth of infants and nursing babies you have established strength because of your adversaries, to make the enemy and the revengeful cease. When I see your heavens, the work of your fingers, the moon and the stars which you have established, what is man that you remember him, and the son of man that you care for him? Yet you have made him a little lower than the angels, and you crown him with glory and majesty. You make him to rule over the works of your hands. You have put all things under his feet, all sheep and oxen, and also the animals of the field, the birds of the heavens, and the fish of the sea, whatever passes through the paths of the seas. O Yahweh our Lord, how majestic is your name in all the earth. So, if we were originally created holy, righteous, and in God's image, which we were, the natural next question would be, question 7, then where does this corrupt human nature come from? The answer, the fall and disobedience of our first parents, Adam and Eve, in paradise. This fall has so poisoned our nature that we are all conceived and born in a sinful condition. Okay, so this answer was broken down into 3 parts. Now first, the fall and disobedience of Adam and Eve. And as all seeker-sensitive pastors warn their congregants, this will be a little lengthy section in the Bible. Hang in there, folks. We'll get through this together. Although, truth be told, when they say it, it's a lengthy, passage. They're usually talking about, 3 or 4 verses max. They know their congregants or audience or whatever they are don't really have the attention span to listen to that God book for very long. Now, the Heidelberg, that wants us to read all of Genesis 3, which we're going to do. And don't skip ahead. This actually doesn't take that long. Don't zone out. This is literally our history. This is your history. This is quite literally the reason that we see the chaos in the world that we live in right now. Now the serpent was more crafty than any beast of the field which Yahweh God had made. And he said to the woman, Indeed, has God said, You shall not eat from any tree of the garden? And the woman said to the serpent, From the fruit of the trees of the garden we may eat. But from the fruit of the tree which is in the midst of the garden, God said, You shall not eat from it, and you shall not touch it, lest you die. And the serpent said to the woman, You surely will not die, for God knows that in the day you eat from it, your eyes will be opened, and you will be like God, knowing good and evil. Then the woman saw that the tree was good for food, that it was a delight to the eyes, and that the tree was desirable to make one wise. So she took from its fruit and ate. And she gave also to her husband with her, and he ate. And the eyes of both of them were opened, and they knew that they were naked, and they sewed fig leaves together and made themselves loin coverings. Then they heard the sound of Yahweh God walking in the garden in the cool of the day, and the man and the wife hid themselves from the presence of Yahweh God in the midst of the trees of the garden. Yahweh God called to the man and said to him, Where are you? And he said, I heard the sound of you in the garden, and I was afraid because I was naked, so I hid. And he said, Who told you that you were naked? Have you eaten from the tree of which I commanded you not to eat? And the man said, The woman whom you gave to be with me, she gave to me from the tree, and I ate. Then Yahweh God said to the woman, What is this you have done? And the woman said, The serpent deceived me, and I ate. And Yahweh God said to the serpent, Because you have done this, cursed are you more than any of the cattle, and more than every beast of the field. On your belly you will go, and dust you will eat all the days of your life. And I will put enmity between you and the woman, and between your seed and her seed. He shall bruise you on the head, and you shall bruise him on the heel. To the woman he said, I will greatly multiply your pain and conception. In pain you will bear children. Your desire will be for your husband, and he will rule over you. And then to Adam he said, because you have listened to the voice of your wife, and have eaten from the tree about which I commanded you, saying, you shall not eat from it, cursed is the ground because of you. In pain you will eat of it all the days of your life. Both thorns and thistles it shall grow for you, and you will eat the plants of the field. By the sweat of your face you will eat bread, till you return to the ground, because from it you were taken, for you are dust, and to dust you shall return. Now the man called his wife's name Eve, because she was the mother of all the living. Then Yahweh God made garments of skin for Adam and his wife, and he clothed them. Then Yahweh God said, behold, the man has become like one of us, to know good and evil. And now, lest he send forth his hand, and take also from the tree of life, and eat, and live forever. Therefore Yahweh God sent him out from the Garden of Eden, to cultivate the ground from which he was taken. So he drove the man out, and at the east of the Garden of Eden he stationed the cherubim, and the flaming sword which turned every direction, to guard the way to the tree of life. So there is so much in this chapter. It is rich with historical, scientific, practical, theological, and prophetic imagery. I'm not going to cover all the various aspects here. If you're curious, you can dig back through my weekly goal updates, etc., and find where I've spoken about this chapter. For our purposes, the serpent or the snake was used by Satan. I don't happen to believe that the snake was Satan, or that the snake was indwelt by Satan. I can't make that logically work, so I believe the snake was willingly used by Satan to deceive the woman. The man, however, was right there, or very close at least. He could have stopped this. That's what we assume. And even if he couldn't have stopped Eve from eating the fruit, he didn't have to eat it. He, as the head, as the responsible party, could have stopped this entire thing by not eating the fruit. So why didn't he? Well, we only have speculation to go on for that answer. That said, from a perspective of God's ultimate sovereignty, Adam didn't stop this because this fall was not out of God's control either. For mercy to exist, we must have actions deserving a penalty. For grace to exist, we must have fallenness. If sin never happened, God could not display his glory and his power and his love through his Son, and we would never understand who God is to even the limited ability that we currently understand him. Moving on, as for the fall poisoning our nature, Romans 5:12 and 18-19 says, therefore, just as through one man sin entered into the world, and death through sin, and so death spread to all men, because all sinned. So then as through one transgression there resulted condemnation to all men, even so through one act of righteousness there resulted justification of life to all men. For as through the one man's disobedience the many were appointed sinners, even so through the obedience of the one the many will be appointed righteous. See, Adam was our federal head, our spokesperson, as it were. Jesus is the new and better Adam, the federal head of all his elect, all of his children. Now, the Pelagian heresy from a long time ago stated that man wasn't born sinful, and man was the initiator and final decision maker with regard to salvation, and God had no say in it. Now, after that was branded a heresy, semi-Pelagianism came out, which added back in that the curse of original sin is actually passed to all mankind from Adam, sure. But it left that free will thing in there with God's inability to say anything about it. Arminianism is basically a kissing cousin of semi-Pelagianism. The difference being that semi-Pelagians believe that they take the initiative to reach out to God. Arminians believe God has given mankind that spark of goodness called prevenient grace, or grace that comes before, and then God takes the initiative to reach out to the sinner, and then it's up to us if we choose to use that grace or not and accept salvation. Once again, though, God has no say in our decision. Note that this makes man sovereign. Arminianism is, by definition, a low view of God. Now, I'd wager that most evangelical churches today are actually semi-Pelagian in their teaching. I can tell you that for me, it's an uncomfortable feeling to attempt to place myself as sovereign over God, to have a low view of God's omnipotence, and to be attached in a smaller number of degrees than it takes to reach Kevin Bacon to a heresy. Reformed theology, in contrast, says that God does the reaching. The sovereign God does the electing, the granting of faith, the bestowing of grace. When God regenerates our hearts and opens our eyes, we, in return, desire God, as we now see him for who he is. Okay, Whole lot more that goes into that, and a lot of argumentation surrounding that. I believe wholeheartedly that I can defend the Reformed doctrine using the Bible, which is only sort of true with the Arminian position, and not even possible with the Pelagian or semi-Pelagian view. Moving on, the final piece of the answer to question 7. All man is conceived and born in a sinful condition. They go to Psalm 51:5. Behold, I was brought forth in iniquity, and in sin my mother conceived me. Now, this doesn't mean that the mother did anything perverse or immoral. It also doesn't mean that sex inside of a marriage is wrong or anything like that. This, speaking from the spiritual, eternal realm, we look at mom. She's a sinner, maybe saved, maybe not. You and I, sinners, maybe saved, maybe not. And that's all because Adam sinned. This is a poetic way of saying that Adam is our federal head, our representative, and his choices have flowed throughout all history, throughout every generation, spilling the curse of original sin to all man and woman. These days I have to throw that in there, apparently. And that's probably a good place for us to stop as cursed sinners poisoned by Adam. Next time, continuing on in the Catechism, we'll finish Part 1, the misery of this life, and possibly move into Part 2, the deliverance from this curse, which happens to contain the majority of the questions contained in the Catechism. So I threw a bunch of things out there for you to ponder, research, yell at me about. If you want to yell, send me an email or comment on the episode. Make sure you use all caps. Make sure I know. If you're especially angry at me, pushing the Calvinism thing on you, type extra hard on the keyboard in all caps. And just, if you like what I'm saying, if you have questions or other ideas, and you're not angry with me, you can also comment or email as well. I'm not going to go and turn those away. I might need a friend. So, until we meet again, go forth and strive to know what you believe and why. And with that, sadly, we've reached the end of yet another episode of the Logical Christian Podcast. I feel we've bonded as we've laughed and cried and twisted our faces in incredulity. If you've enjoyed or found value in what you've heard, go on and do all the podcast things. And don't forget to check the show notes for links and contact info. Lawrence J. Peters said, "Against logic there is no armor like ignorance." Jesus told us that if you abide in my word, you are truly my disciples, and you will know the truth, and the truth will set you free. So stay in the word, stay logical, stay faithful, and until next time, God bless.